We are interrupting your regularly scheduled draft profile videos for videos still to do with the draft, but not necessarily a profile. What's up, everybody? It's JJ Buckets. Gonna talk about a potential draft scenario kind of emerging here for the Raptors. Before I fully get into things, usual drill, make sure you're leaving a like on the video. Helps the algorithm out a ton. You know that. Of course you know that. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Plus, if you plan on doing any responsible sports betting in the near future, just make sure you check out my link in the description below. A report came out the other day about the Memphis Grizzlies and their desire to shop the number 9 overall lottery pick that they have in this year's draft with the hopes of adding a player that would help them win now. That report is courtesy of Zach Lowe, and it brings up an interesting thought and discussion to be had, right? So for the Grizzlies, they very naturally missed the playoffs this year. They were a hospital ward all season, struggled with injuries. I mean, there's only so much you can do when you have that much talent unavailable for games. And very clearly, the Grizzlies were bad as a result, right? But they're going to get all their guys back. This team clearly thinks of themselves as a contender. They think they're a lot better than their non-playoff finish this year. And you could debate whether or not the Grizzlies are actually that good, especially with the emergence of some new teams. But the point there being is they are trying to be that good, right? And as mentioned from the report, it's very clear that they have a desire to move that pick in this year's draft. It would be number 9, which is a selection down. A single selection down from where the Raptors pick that conveyed to the Spurs ended up going, right? The Raptors pick, as we all know, in the NBA draft lottery slid from 6th to 8th, so ended up going to San Antonio, took Toronto out of the lottery, and I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this, right? Memphis wants to trade that pick. They're looking for win now players. Toronto is in rebuilding mode. I think it's clear to everybody that they're in rebuilding mode. Is this a natural trade partner for the Raptors? Because I would argue, yes, it absolutely is. Naturally, this depends on Masai Ujiri and his desire of potentially moving a key piece here. And I think it's going to be obvious when I say it, but I'm going to say it later anyways, and why I think it makes a lot of sense. But the availability definitely is there. And if the front office is committed to doing a proper full rebuild, this is pretty easy in my opinion for the Raptors. If you are sending out Jakob Poeltl in this deal, you pretty much essentially are undoing the trade that you made to get him to Toronto, right? You're getting the 9th pick instead of the 8th pick that you would have had with that pick that ended up conveying to the Spurs, which it's a 1 spot difference in the draft. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think you're really losing massive sleep over that, but it does bring up an interesting discussion of whether or not you do that trade. Because let me tell you, you take a look at it, the contracts are very easy to match with Yak's salary. All it really takes is like a Brandon Clark and like a John Conchar or something like that. The salary works there immediately. You attach that pick and it gives the Grizzlies the win now player that they're looking for. The Grizzlies obviously moved off of Steven Adams last season because of his injury, and now they have a big hole to fill at that 5 spot. And especially with the Western Conference and the fact that you have to go through guys like Anthony Davis and very obviously Nikola Jokic is the main one, you want to have a quality big man that can at least be thrown against those guys. Look, nobody's expecting Yak to shut down Nikola Jokic, and if you are, check yourself into your local medical facility, because nobody's slowing down and shutting down Jokic, but you'd at least like to have a considerable body to throw against him if you're a contending team like the Grizzlies envision themselves to be. So yeah, that's where the Raptors come in. That's where Jakob Poeltl does come into the mix here. For Toronto, I think this is an interesting one because it depends on a couple of things. Now, first of all, I would just like to say Jakob Poeltl is a quality NBA player. He's an above average NBA player, and in a vacuum, you want him on the team. In the specific circumstances that the Raptors are in, especially with the upcoming draft class being as highly touted, like the 2025 one, not the 2024 one, would you not want to be a team that's positioned in the lottery for that year, especially after losing out on your pick this year, especially when you then get to double down and you actually do get a lottery pick this year in this hypothetical trade, and you turn around and you not only get a lottery pick and get a chance to potentially get a guy that you like, get a guy that you've probably been scouting and you've been, robbed, I guess, to an extent of the opportunity of selecting because that pick, conveyed to the Spurs. In this situation, you get to make the pick on, that top guy that you probably liked anyways. Hypothetically, I mean, with the, I'd say, like, range of prospects that could go from like as high as like 1 to like whatever else, like there's no consensus on this year's draft, so there's a good guy, there's a good chance that your guy, or at least one of your guys, is going to be available at 9. And then with that youth movement, you're obviously putting yourself in a position where this team likely, with the hypothetical departure of Yak, is probably not good enough to, be a playoff team next year. I don't think that's a stretch to say. But my argument there being is, with Yak, this team could hover around like the play-in or something. And who knows, like maybe they sneak into the playoffs. But like, is that really where you necessarily want to be when considering 2025 is going to give you a chance at a prospect like Cooper Flagg or Ace Bailey, somebody of that sort? In particular, Ace Bailey would actually be a really interesting fit with the team. Well, I mean, so would Cooper to some extent, but I think the specific positioning there is a little more smooth for Bailey. Regardless, specific prospects aside, the point there being is that 2025 is loaded. This move pretty much positions with your timeline. I mean, look, I know Masai Ujiri hasn't always been the most patient man. That's quite frankly how you ended up in the Jakob situation. To an extent, is a lack of patience and, quite frankly, let's be honest, a little bit of stubbornness in terms of thinking that core was going to work when a lot of signs pointed to the fact that they probably weren't. And Jakob definitely filled a hole. And Jakob, again, is a good player. This isn't meant to scapegoat Jakob. Don't take this out of context. He is a good player, and that's not the issue here. The issue is the timeline and the guys that you have on your roster and the upcoming draft class, quite frankly. And then I guess to that note, like, not only this class and potentially getting a pick back in the lottery for a young team, but also turning around and being in the position to select a guy pretty high up in the draft next year. So I just wanted to throw this out there because I thought it was a very interesting rumor. And if you're the Raptors, it gives you a chance to undo a little bit, to reset a little bit in that regard. I think it's a matter of patience when it comes to the front office and what they want to do. And it depends, I guess, on where they think they are. But like right now, as it currently sits, you got the 19 pick, which is all right, and you have the 31st. Like, that's not bad, but considering the team that you were last season, how bad that squad was, and again, some of the foundational pieces that are in place but still need more support, and just why wouldn't you do this deal? That's my question to throw out there. I mean, again, obviously hypothetical deal, hypothetical scenario, but it's a very relevant rumor, I think, to the Toronto Raptors. If Memphis is looking to get out of there, is looking for a win-now player, you have the need. It certainly answers a lot of questions for you. It certainly positions you in a very intriguing spot moving forward if you're Toronto. So what's the argument against it is what I'm asking. And that's what I'll ask for anybody in the comment section if they do want to drop it. I think that pretty much does it for me on this video. I've kind of shared my 2 cents on the matter, and I will be back to doing draft profiles next week. I think I picked a good time to transition to some of the more depth guys, I guess, in this year's draft. For those of you that missed it, I talked about wanting to do Tyler Smith as the next draft profile. And after the Raptors lost their lottery pick, yeah, those are the guys that you got to start looking at, right? But again, an interesting scenario here to potentially undo some of the things that have been done should the desire be there to undo some of those things. That more or less does it for me, folks. Again, any thoughts, drop it in the comment section. This is, I think, an interesting discussion to be had. If you're new here and you're still watching, subscribe to the channel. We're near the end of videos, so that's the usual drill. Also, like the video if you're still watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it, right? Other than that, folks, it's been JJ Buckets. It's been a pleasure, and I will see everybody next time.